Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to begin our look at circles. We're going to spend quite a lot of time looking at some circles, some different measurements we can make with circles, and we're going to start with the most important relationship with circles. That's the relationship between circumference and diameter. Okay? Who can tell me or remind us what a circumference of a circle is? Anybody? Go ahead. Sure. Yeah, it's the outside, the length of that line that creates the outside of a circle, right? Is the circumference. How about the diameter?
That wasn't my thing.
Okay, all right.
Why would it be called a circle outside the circle?
Because remember, perimeter is lines on the are those straight lines, right? And they can't be curved. So we have circumference, or we have circles. It just clues you in that you're dealing with circles instead of those shapes. Yes.
Don't you use the like half circle?
Okay. Well, just
measure the circle?
yeah. Well, we'll talk about the different kinds of measurements. But I'm looking for the definition of diameter. What does diameter mean? There you go. It's a straight line that goes right through the center of the circle, right? So it divides the circle exactly in half.
Should we write that down?
Yeah? Okay. Well, you can write them down if you don't remember. So we can write them down. Remember circumference. We'll write them down. Is the distance around the circle, right? And the diameter is a line through the center from edge to edge.
So the circle doesn't have like corners.
No. In other words, it cuts it in half. Right? So it has to be going through the center and goes all the way from one edge of the circle to the other. Okay? Cuts it completely in half. We good there?
Oh, no. I'm not
Okay.
It's writing it.
Come on. So the circumference is the distance around. Diameter is a line that goes straight through. Okay. Yes?
I have one question.
Uh-huh.
When do we need circles in life?
In life, your whole life is
Your life is a circle.
full of circles.
But why do we need to measure it?
Because you need to pass this test to get out of the year 8.
Okay.
How's that?
What is the test?
Wait, so get out of your right eye.
Back with me. All right. What we're going to do is we're going to go to Education Perfect and look at some definitions. We're going to do some things together. So, what are the 3 things that you should have in front of you right now? Book. Okay. I don't see a lot of calculators. You're going to want them. So pull them out. So we're going to discover the relationship. So it says the following circle has a circumference of 25.13. Very strange number, yeah? Not just an easy number. And a diameter of 8. What is the ratio between the circumference and the diameter? Now, first of all, remember that anytime you see that word ratio, we've talked about it before. A ratio is a comparison, and it's usually written as a fraction. There you are. Right. Good. And always remember to watch the way the words go, the order the words are in, that's the way you're going to compare them. So in this one, it says the ratio between the which thing? Circumference and the what? Diameter. Which means the circumference will be in the what? In the numerator, in the top. And the diameter will be in the denominator. There you go. So using your calculators, guys, I want you to put this in there, but I don't want anybody telling me the answer. Just put it in there. 25.13 over diameter of 8, so over 8. And remember, it's the same as the division bar, right? So 25.13 divided by 8 is pretty much what you're doing, right? Got it. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on someone. So everybody have an answer. I'm going to call on someone to tell me what their answer is, but listen to the directions. There's nothing there you need to see yet.
Can I say the
Okay.
answer if I knew it without calculating?
No. Because I want to call on somebody. Taylor, you're our lucky volunteer. All right, Taylor, can you tell me what answer you got rounded to 2 decimal places? What answer did you get? What number? Well, there's somebody else at your table that has one. Come on.
3.1415.
Rounded to 2 decimal places, please.
314.125.
Okay, so we put in our circumference or our diameter, and the answer rounded to 2 decimal places was 3.14. Do we agree? Okay. All right, here we go. Let's look at another one.
Can I keep my hand up?
There you go. Go. Don't call it out. I'm going to call on somebody for the answer.
Can I please say
So it's a really special relationship. Anytime you divide any circumference by its diameter, right? The numbers, of course, have to come from the same circle. You can't just come from different circles. But if they do, every time you do that, you're going to get exactly the same decimal. It's just a fluke of the way it works. Every time. And if you look at it, even if you didn't round it, you would get exactly the same decimal.
Wait, why?
Because it's always the relationship between those two, no matter what numbers. It's just because it's a circle. That's what happens.
So will you get the same number and decimal, or just the same?
Same number, decimal, all the way along.
So number and.
Yeah. So the same number. Don't worry about and decimal because it means the same thing. All right. So here's one more. Put it in your calculator. 53.41 and a diameter of 17. What do you think you're going to get before you even have to do it? 3.14. Pretty cool, huh? All right. So that ratio and that comparison of circumference and diameter is always true. Now, were there a lot more decimals, numbers after 0.14? Yes. But in general, we round it. In general, we round it, guys, come on, to 2 decimal places. And for our calculations, rounding it to 2 decimal places will be fine. Okay? All right. So let's continue. So the ratio of circumference to diameter is a specific number that we call pi. Pi is the Greek letter, and you've seen that symbol before for pi. So this symbol is the symbol for the Greek letter pi. Right? Yeah? And it's approximately, remember the squiggly equal symbol means approximately 3.14. We say approximately because, as you noticed when you push those numbers in your calculator, were there a lot more decimals after that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But in general use, and what we're going to do for this class, rounded to 2 decimal places will be fine. Okay? So we can use pi on our calculator. If you look at your scientific calculator, there's actually a key for pi. Right? But do you have to know the key for pi? No. We can simply use what number? 3. Well, yours is not a scientific calculator. So 3.14. Yeah. In order to be able to do calculations involving circles, we need that relationship to be, and it's involved in every formula that has to do with circles. Okay? All right. Let's continue. Pi is what's called an irrational number. In other words, the decimal will go on infinitely. It'll never stop, and it will never repeat. So it just keeps on going. It never stops. It never ever stops, yeah. Okay? So the digits go up forever, and you can't. But mathematicians have been looking to see if it ever stops for years. As a matter of fact, huge supercomputers have been used to see if it does. And they spent years working on it. And guess what? It doesn't. It It never stops. Well, the decimal is it's always 3.14, but the decimal afterward that never stops going. You can divide and divide for the rest of your life and never find the end of it. Strange. Okay. So, which is one reason why we round it to 3.14, because we don't want to go insane, right? Any more insane than we already are. Okay, here we go.
Wait, no.
All right. You don't need all those digits. All right? Since pi has a relationship with the circumference and diameter, we can use it to find the length of the circumference if we know the diameter. Does that make sense? Remember, if you know one thing, okay, and you're looking for another thing, we can use what we know to find out what we don't know. Does that make sense? So look at this little formula that they've given you here. Circumference over the diameter equals pi. Do we agree? Okay. Well, if that's the case, then that means that I can get rid of this fraction. Remember, what does a fraction bar mean to do? What operation? Divide. And what's the opposite of divide? Multiply. So, instead of having circumference divided by diameter, we can leave the circumference over here and change it to pi, not divided by, but the opposite, which is multiply by the diameter. So, circumference then is equal to pi times the diameter. And remember that if you have two things, letters side by side, what operation does that always indicate? Do you remember? Multiplication. Multiplication is the only operation that requires no symbol at all. So in our area formulas we were always using. So because it's the most common operation, and so it's the only one we can do that with. Right? Because everything else we have to have an operation symbol. Okay? All right. So here's, guys, come on. So if we're looking for the circumference of a circle, all we have to do is take pi times what? The diameter. Okay, so C equals pi times D. And you can write it out as multiplication if you want to.
And it's like if you want to find.
Okay.
And then
Like.
Okay, so we've got another piece of information. We've talked about the circumference. Sorry. We've talked about circumference being the distance around. Yes? We've talked about the diameter being a line halfway through. And the other really important measurement we need is something called the radius. Does anybody remember how to find the radius, or what the radius is? Anybody at all? Okay.
I
Okay, Nada, yeah, sure.
know. So the radius is pretty much half it's from the center to the outside. So
Exactly.
half the diameter.
The radius is half of the diameter. So in other words, it goes from the center to one edge of the circle.
Oh, well, go to any
Okay? Yeah, exactly. It can go from anywhere at all. From the center to one edge of the circle. So if I know diameter, I can find the radius by simply taking what of it? Half of it, which means divide it by what? 2. Either multiply by 1/2, divide by 2, that means exactly the same thing, right? So, which means that if I know the radius, I can find the diameter by making it twice as big. What does it mean to make it twice as big? Times it by 2. There you go. All right. So radius is 1/2 of the diameter, right? And diameter, is 2 times the radius. Does it make sense going back and forth? Right? Because which one's bigger? Diameter is always the bigger one. Radius is the smaller one. And it's important that you, guys, come on. It's important that you understand that relationship. Because if you don't, you're not going to know what number to use. You're going to be using something that's too big or too small. Okay? All right? So, I'm just going to ask you. Okay. Now, so if you think about that, then that allows us to write the circumference formula in terms of the radius. Because remember that circumference is pi times the diameter. Yeah? And diameter is the same as 2 times the radius. Right? So that also means that circumference is pi times 2 times the radius. You agree? But in mathematics, we don't like numbers in the middle if we have numbers and letters. And remember, pi is a letter. And so what they'll do is they'll pull it up to the front. So circumference equals 2 pi r, which stands for, hold on a minute, let me finish what I'm saying, guys. Which stands for 2 times the pi, times the radius. Okay? Yes, I'm sorry. What's your question?
Why don't you just put T instead?
Because sometimes you know the radius and not the diameter, and it's just, you're going to use them both ways. Okay? Yeah. You could. So, those, and just like you're saying, Maddie, those are totally, absolutely the same thing. So, 2 pi r is exactly the same thing as saying, not 2. It's the same as saying pi times the diameter. And since they are the same, they can be used interchangeably. But sometimes you're going to be given the radius, sometimes the diameter. It really doesn't matter which formula you use. They are identical. You're exactly right. Okay? You can find the circumference from doing either one of them. Okay? Yes?
What is that last one say down the corner? Like the 2 is the kind of...
This thing?
Yeah.
2 pi r. Sorry, my pi is not very pretty. Okay? All right. Okay? Yes?
If I'm writing this in my book, instead of putting 2, because 2 is the number on the circle, and it wouldn't apply to other things.
Yeah. So, no, I'm not getting it. I'm not understanding what you
That
mean.
doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay? 2 pi r. 2 pi r or pi times the diameter. You have to use one or the other.
So like a circle always has half.
Okay?
Exactly. So why would we do this?
All right.
Mrs. Snow.
So it doesn't matter which formula you use, they will both give you the circumference. Okay? But it depends on the information that you know. All right? So let's look at some examples. Okay. So we're going to find the circumference of the following circle. All right? Well, I have a line that goes all the way across. Yeah? A measurement that goes all the way across. What is that called? The diameter. So in this case, I know that the diameter is 8 meters. Yes? So I'll use the pi, circumference equals pi times diameter formula. Because I know the diameter, right? So let's put that in. C is what I'm looking for. What number am I going to use for pi? 3.14 times, what's my diameter? 8 what?
Meters.
Yes. Remember, I want you to put those units in there so that you get the right units out at the end. So now let's multiply. Can somebody tell me what is 3.14 times 8 going to give me?
25.12.
25 point what?
25.12.
Okay. 25.12. And nothing times meters just stays what? Meters. So there is our answer. It's that easy. Okay? Now, if you do not put meters, you're completely and absolutely wrong. Okay? So when you give an answer, and you use use pi rounded or use pi period, doesn't matter because you cannot possibly get it the entire way. You're going to have to round your answer. Even if you use the whole thing, you're going to round your answer. Then you're going to use the approximately symbol. Okay? All right. Of course you do. Okay. All right. So, now, sometimes all you need is an estimate of a value. And in that case, remember we found estimates before, right? What we did was, instead of using the actual numbers, we rounded them. So in this case, they want you to find an estimate of the circumference of the circle, and they're using what number is pi? 3. So they just rounded it to the nearest whole number. So the estimate of the circumference of this circle, what is the formula the number they want you to use for pi? 3. So circumference is about, why about? Because we rounded, we're using approximation, times, what is the diameter? Which gives us the circumference of about what? 9. 9 what? Centimeters, exactly. Make sure you put those units in there. If you give me, on this assessment, if I don't see every bit of this, including the units, it's wrong. The right answer is units, too. That's not the right answer.
Do you have to put that you're working on it?
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to be able to use a calculator on the assessment.
Yeah.
So if you don't write it out, it's not right. So either one. So depending on the information you know. If you're given the radius, we can just multiply it by what? 2, and that'll tell us the diameter, and then we can use that formula always if you want to, right? But then you're doing 2 steps. But don't you have to do the same 2 steps anyway? Yeah, so it really doesn't matter which one you use. So let's look at it. Let's look at it and do it both ways, okay? So, because I'm given the radius, C equals 2 pi r is the formula for using it with radius, right? So C is about, why about? Because pi is always going to be an estimate, right? So it's never going to be equals, it's always going to be about. What am I, and so 2 times, what number am I going to use in place of pi?
3.
3 times, what number is the radius?
5 meters.
Thank you so much for that. 5, not 5, but 5 what? Meters. There you go. So which gives us C is about, 2 times 3 is 6 times 5 is 30, and 30 m. Yes?
So, in the test, if we don't know working with the meters, will we not get it right?
What now? Let's do it the other way. We can also use the other formula, but since we're given the radius, before I can use this formula, I have to turn radius into diameter by simply multiplying it by what? 2. So diameter equals 2 times 5 meters. So the diameter equals 10 meters, right? And now I can say C is approximately 3 times 10 meters. So C is approximately equal to what? 30 meters. Yeah. Remember, you can use them interchangeably, either way. Okay? Now. Okay. All right. Sometimes you're going to want to find the circumference in terms of pi. Anytime you see that expression in terms of, that means it's going to have that in it. So in other words, when you get your answer, it's going to have the symbol for pi in your answer. So does that mean you're going to put a number in place of that symbol?
No.
Nope, you're just going to put the symbol pi. Yes?
What if you draw the symbol wrong?
Nah, you can't. Just draw it as well as you can. You've seen mine, it looks...
What if you draw
Well, as long as it looks something like that, you're fine.
just 2?
It's got to have a little bit of a curve, but yeah. Okay, so look at this one. This circle has a diameter of 12 meters. Let's find the circumference in terms of pi. So the circumference is just pi times the diameter. So you'll see that they put the 12 meters in there, and you end up with 12 pi meters. Now, why, is the 12 and the pi connected? And then the units at the end. Anybody think about that? Sure.
Because they use multiplication, so it's easy to get it. But on the hook, the end, so you don't get confused by every time there.
There you go. So yeah, the 12 and the pi are the things that you would normally be numbers that you would multiply together, right? So they're stuck together, and the units are usually just follow along at the end. So that's why they're separate. Now, when you do this, guys, you will not write it exactly the way they do it. On the assessment, how would I expect this to be written? 12 pi times 12 what?
Meters.
There you go. So do not be lazy like them. All right.